Some secrets are buried so deep that even concrete walls and steel bars can't contain them. What I witnessed in cell block 7 that night wasn't just medical malpractice. It was something far more systematic, far more deliberate, and far more dangerous than anything I'd encountered in 15 years of prison medicine. Before I tell you what happened, I need to know something. We would love to know where you are watching from. It's good to know how far the truth is reaching out, because what you're about to hear might make you understand why certain information needs to travel far beyond these walls. The call came at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in November. I was in the medical wing of MDC Brooklyn, finishing paperwork from the evening shift when my emergency pager went off. The message was brief: medical emergency, Block 7, Cell 23. Immediate response required. A Block 7 was special housing. High-profile inmates, protective custody, the kind of prisoners who needed isolation for their own safety or everyone else's. I grabbed my emergency kit and headed toward the secured elevator, badging through 3 separate checkpoints before reaching the 7th floor. The guards were nervous, more nervous than usual for a medical call. Officer Rodriguez, who'd been working Block 7 for 6 years, met me at the entrance with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. "Daf, I gotta warn you," he said, his voice lower than normal. "This one's different, real different." He led me down the corridor, our footsteps echoing off the polished concrete. The entire block was eerily quiet. Usually, even at this hour, you'd hear snoring, muttering, the occasional nightmare. Tonight, nothing. Like every inmate was holding their breath. Cell 23 was at the end of the hall. As we approached, I could smell it. Not the usual prison odors of disinfectant and unwashed bodies, but something else. Metallic sharp, with an underlying sweetness that made my stomach turn. "Has been like this for about 40 minutes, Rodriguez explained, unlocking the cell door. "Started around 20:30. Convulsions, then this condition." The cell door swung open, and I saw him. Sean Combs sat on his bunk, back against the wall, completely motionless. His eyes were open but unfocused, staring at something beyond the cell walls. What caught my attention immediately wasn't his catatonic state, but the marks on his arms. Dark, irregular patches of skin that looked like burns, but had a geometric precision to them. They formed patterns I didn't recognize, symbols that seemed to have been carved or branded with surgical accuracy. Fresh wounds, still weeping a clear fluid that caught the harsh fluorescent light. "How long has he had these marks?" I asked, setting down my kit and pulling on latex gloves. Rodriguez exchanged a look with the other guard. "That's just it, Doc. They weren't there during evening count. These appeared tonight." I approached the bunk slowly. Combs didn't react to my presence, didn't blink, didn't acknowledge that anyone had entered his cell. His breathing was shallow but steady. Pulse elevated but regular. But the marks on his arms continued to weep that strange, clear fluid. I took out my pen light and examined the patterns more closely. They weren't random wounds. Someone had carved these symbols with precision, each line exactly the right depth to penetrate the dermis without hitting major blood vessels. Professional work, medical work. "I need to run some tests," I told Rodriguez. "Standard blood panel, plus some additional screenings." That's when Combs spoke for the first time. "They're already in the system?" he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "Been spreading for weeks. You'll find them soon enough." I looked at him sharply. His eyes had focused now, but they weren't looking at me. They were staring at a point just over my shoulder, as if someone was standing behind me. "Find what?" I asked. He smiled then, but it wasn't his smile. It was too wide, too knowing, like someone else was wearing his face. The markers. The ones they've been injecting into the water supply, into the meals, into the medication. His head tilted slightly. "You think this is about me? This is about preparation." I felt a chill run down my spine. In 15 years of prison medicine, I'd seen plenty of psychiatric breaks, plenty of paranoid delusions. This felt different. This felt planned. Preparation for what? I found myself asking. though every instinct told me I didn't want to know the answer. Combs turned his head, slowly until his eyes met mine. When he spoke again, his voice carried harmonics I'd never heard from a human throat. For when they need us all to be the same. I drew blood samples immediately. 3 vials that I labeled with standard medical codes. But as I worked, I noticed something that made my hands shake. The blood wasn't the right color. It had a golden tint to it, subtle but unmistakable under the harsh cell lighting. Rodriguez, I need to see his medical file, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Everything since he arrived. While the guard went to retrieve the records, I continued my examination. Combs had returned to his catatonic state, but I could feel him watching me through his peripheral vision. The clear fluid from his wounds had started to coagulate, forming crystalline structures that definitely weren't normal blood clotting. The medical file Rodriguez brought back was thicker than it should have been for a 2-month stay. I flipped through pages of routine health screenings, psychiatric evaluations, and something that made me stop cold, a series of blood tests I hadn't ordered. Tests I'd never seen before. HIV panels, but not standard ones. These were marked with codes I didn't recognize. Variant 7, adaptation, protocol, transmission vector analysis. Each test was signed off by a doctor whose name wasn't in our system database. Who's Dr. Martino? I asked Rodriguez, pointing to the signature on the most recent test. He frowned. Never heard of him. You're the only doctor cleared for Block 7 medical. I looked at the date on the test, 3 days ago. While I was off duty, someone had been in this facility, drawing blood from our highest security inmates, running tests that shouldn't exist. I need to check something, I told Rodriguez. Stay here with him. I headed back to the medical wing, my mind racing. In the lab, I ran Combs' blood through our standard HIV screening equipment. The results came back in 12 minutes, and what I saw made my mouth go dry. Positive. But not just positive. The viral load readings were off the charts, but the protein markers were all wrong. This wasn't HIV as we knew it. This was something that had been modified, enhanced, weaponized. I ran the test 3 more times. Same results. Then I did something that probably saved my life. I made copies of everything. The blood work, the mysterious test results, photos of those geometric marks on Combs' arms. I uploaded them to a secure server that existed outside the prison system. When I returned to Block 7, Combs was standing at his cell door, gripping the bars with hands that no longer looked entirely human. His fingers had elongated slightly, and his skin had taken on that same translucent quality I'd noticed in his blood samples. You found it, didn't you? He said as I approached. Found what they've been perfecting. What are you talking about? I demanded, though part of me already suspected the answer. The delivery system. HIV was just the foundation. They needed something that could spread efficiently, something that could carry their real payload into every cell of the human body. He pressed his face against the bars, and I could see that his eyes had changed color. They were golden now, the same tint as his blood. Payload for what? Consciousness modification, neural restructuring. They're not trying to kill people anymore. They're trying to improve them. Make them more cooperative. The implications hit me like a physical blow. If what he was saying was true, if someone had weaponized HIV as a delivery system for some kind of mind control agent, then every inmate in this facility could be infected. Every person they'd had contact with. Every visitor, every guard, every medical professional, including me. How many? I whispered. Combs smiled with teeth that looked sharper than they had an hour ago. Check Block 6. Check Block 5. Check the women's facility across town. Check the staff quarters. His voice was changing too, taking on those same harmonic overtones I'd heard earlier. They've been testing it for months. Perfect dosage, perfect transmission rates, perfect integration with human neural tissue. And tomorrow, he paused, tilting his head as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Tomorrow they start phase 2. I backed away from the cell, my heart pounding. Rodriguez, we need to lock down this entire facility. No one in or out until we can figure out what's happening. But when I turned around, Rodriguez was gone. In his place stood a man I'd never seen before, wearing a doctor's coat over a designer suit. He was tall, pale, with the kind of ageless face that could have been 30 or 60. "Dr. Martino, I presume?" I said, my hand moving instinctively toward the emergency alarm on my belt. "Don't bother," he said calmly. "The alarm system has been offline for the past hour. Amazing what a little financial incentive can accomplish with security contractors." Behind him, I could hear footsteps echoing down the corridor, multiple sets, moving in perfect synchronization. When they came into view, I understood why the entire block had been so quiet. Every guard who should have been on duty was there, but they all moved with the same fluid grace, the same predatory awareness. Their eyes held the same golden tint I'd seen in Com's blood samples. "You've been very thorough, Doctor," Martino continued, consulting a tablet that displayed my recent computer activity in real time. Blood tests, file reviews, even data backup to external servers. Exactly the kind of initiative we're looking for. Looking for in what? In our new medical director. The position comes with significant benefits. Enhanced cognitive capacity, perfect health, freedom from the limitations of individual consciousness. He gestured toward the transformed guards. A chance to be part of something much larger than yourself. Through the cell bars, I could hear Combs laughing. Not with humor, but with the sound of someone who had stopped being entirely human. "The beautiful thing about using HIV as a vector," Martino explained, pulling a syringe from his coat pocket, "is that people are already afraid of it, already isolated from society. Perfect test subjects for perfecting our integration protocols." The syringe was filled with the same golden fluid I'd seen weeping from Com's wounds. "This is a concentrated dose, much faster acting than the gradual exposure we've been using on the general population. You'll experience some discomfort during the neural restructuring, but within 72 hours, you'll understand the beauty of what we're accomplishing." I looked down the corridor, calculating distances, wondering if I could reach the stairwell before the transformed guards caught me. Then I remembered something that gave me hope. The copies I'd made, the data uploaded to external servers, evidence that someone, somewhere, might still be able to expose what was happening here. "You're too late," I said, trying to project more confidence than I felt. "I've already documented everything. People outside this facility know what's happening." Martino's smile never wavered. "Do you really think this facility the only site? Do you think we haven't been preparing for exposure?" He gestured to his tablet, which now showed news feeds from around the country. Medical emergencies at correctional facilities in 12 states. Mass illness outbreaks at homeless shelters. Unexplained behavioral changes in patients at psychiatric hospitals. All of them happening simultaneously, all of them following the same pattern. The truth you're so concerned about reaching out. It's already everywhere. And by morning, the integration will be complete enough that exposure won't matter anymore. He stepped closer, the syringe gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The beauty of our approach is that we started with the population society already considers disposable. Prisoners, addicts, the homeless, the mentally ill. People whose disappearances or behavioral changes wouldn't trigger investigations. Behind him, the transformed guards moved in perfect coordination, blocking every potential escape route. Their movements were too fluid, too synchronized to be natural, like they were operating under shared consciousness rather than individual decision-making. But Combs wasn't supposed to be part of this, I said, stalling for time while my mind raced through possible options. "He's too high profile, too visible." Martino's expression darkened. Shen was an unexpected complication. His arrest disrupted a timeline we'd been developing for years. But complications often provide opportunities. He glanced toward the cell where Com stood watching us with those golden eyes. He'd been exposed to preliminary versions of our work through his social circles. Nothing intentional, you understand. Just proximity to individuals who'd undergone early stage integration. But when he arrived here, We realized his existing exposure made him an ideal candidate for accelerated protocols. From inside the cell, Com spoke again, his voice now carrying multiple harmonics, as if several people were speaking through his throat simultaneously. Tell him about the parties. Tell him about the initiations. Tell him how many of us were already partially integrated before we ever knew what was happening. Martino shot him an annoyed look. The entertainment industry provided an excellent testing ground for social compliance modifications. Gradual exposure through recreational substances, carefully monitored behavioral changes, network effects as influence spread through professional relationships. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. The strange behavioral changes I'd been reading about in celebrity culture. The way certain figures seemed to move in lockstep on social and political issues. The rumors about secret gatherings and mysterious rituals. You've been using the entertainment industry as a testing ground, I said. Among others. Politics, technology, finance. Any sector where individual influence can cascade through social networks. Martino consulted his tablet again. But entertainment was particularly effective because the subjects actively sought out consciousness, altering experiences. They paid us to experiment on them. I thought about the blood samples I'd taken from comms, now secured in our medical lab. If I could get word to someone outside the facility, someone who could analyze the samples independently, the samples you took are already secured? Martino said, as if reading my thoughts. Along with your uploaded data. We've been monitoring your digital activity since you first accessed Sean's medical files. And my heart sank. If they had that level of surveillance capability, if they could intercept data transmissions in real time, then the scope of this operation was far larger than I'd imagined. How long? I asked. How long have you been doing this? The current phase began approximately 18 months ago, but the foundational research spans decades. He gestured toward the transformed guards. Perfect integration requires perfect understanding of human neural architecture. We've been mapping consciousness patterns through multiple generations of test subjects. One of the guards stepped forward, and I recognized him as Officer Martinez, who'd been working Block 7 for 3 years. But his eyes held that same golden tint, and when he spoke, his voice carried those unnatural harmonics. The process is elegant, he said in a tone devoid of his usual personality. Individual consciousness remains intact, but becomes part of a larger collective. We retain our memories, our skills, our relationships, but we serve a higher purpose. What purpose? I demanded. Martino smiled. Optimization. Human society is chaotic, inefficient, wasteful. Individual consciousness creates conflict, competition, resource misallocation. Collective consciousness eliminates these inefficiencies. You're talking about slavery. We're talking about evolution. The next stage of human development. He held up the syringe again. This contains everything you need to understand the beauty of what we're creating. Enhanced cognitive capacity, perfect health, freedom from anxiety and depression, connection to a vast network of consciousness that spans continents. From his cell, Combs laughed again. Tell him about the children. Tell him about the schools. Martino's expression hardened. Sean is still adjusting to the integration process. Sometimes fragments of individual consciousness create inappropriate disclosures. But the damage was done. The implications hit me like a physical blow. If they were targeting children, if they had access to school systems, then this wasn't just about controlling marginalized populations. This was about reshaping humanity itself. The juvenile facilities were particularly effective, Martinez said, in that emotionless tone. Young neural tissue integrates more completely with fewer side effects. We've been refining pediatric protocols for 6 months. I felt sick. Children in juvenile detention, already isolated from family support systems, already stigmatized by society. Perfect test subjects that no one would miss or investigate. How many facilities? I whispered. 47 correctional institutions across 12 states. Martino replied matter-of-factly. 16 psychiatric hospitals. 23 homeless shelters. 12 juvenile detention centers. And that's just the controlled testing phase. He stepped closer, and I could see that his eyes were beginning to show that same golden tint. Phase 2 involves mass distribution through existing medical infrastructure, vaccines, blood supplies, organ transplants. Within 6 months, integration will be widespread enough that resistance becomes irrelevant. The syringe was inches from my arm now. Around me, the transformed guards had closed in, their movements perfectly synchronized, their breathing in unnatural unison. Through it all, I could hear comms in his cell, laughing with a sound that no longer belonged to any individual human consciousness. But then I heard something else, footsteps echoing from the stairwell, multiple sets, moving fast, accompanied by voices I recognized as belonging to guards who hadn't been in the facility tonight. Martino heard it too. His calm expression flickered for the first time. "Shift change," I said, hoping my voice sounded steadier than I felt. 7 a.m. rotation comes in early sometimes. Impossible. We control the scheduling systems. But the voices were getting closer, and I could hear the distinctive crackle of radio communications. Real guards, real protocols. Real people who might not yet be part of whatever collective consciousness was spreading through the facility. Martino's tablet lit up with urgent alerts. His expression darkened as he read whatever was displayed. It seems someone triggered an external investigation before you uploaded your data, he said coldly. Federal health authorities received an anonymous tip about medical irregularities at this facility 3 hours ago. My stomach lurched. I hadn't sent any external tips, which meant someone else knew what was happening here. Someone outside Martino's surveillance network. Who? I asked. For the first time since I'd met him, Martino looked uncertain. We're working to identify the source, but it appears our security protocols have been compromised. The footsteps in the stairwell were much closer now, accompanied by authoritative voices demanding access to Block 7. Through the facility's intercom system, I could hear announcements about a federal health inspection that would begin immediately. Martino looked at his tablet again, then at the approaching sounds of what sounded like a full investigative team. His calm demeanor was cracking, revealing something desperate underneath. "Change of plans," he said, raising the syringe toward my neck. "Accelerated integration protocol." The needle was millimeters from my skin when the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in immediately, bathing the corridor in red. In the chaos that followed, I heard the distinctive sound of the facility's lockdown protocols engaging. Steel doors slamming shut, electronic locks clicking into place, ventilation systems shutting down. But this wasn't Martino's doing. His tablet was flashing error messages, and for the first time, the transformed guards looked confused, their perfect synchronization disrupted. "External override," one of them said in a voice that carried uncertainty. "Someone has administrative access to our security systems." Through the facility's PA system, a voice I didn't recognize began speaking with calm authority. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen, CDC Division of High Consequence Pathogens. This facility is now under federal quarantine. All personnel are to remain in their current positions until decontamination protocols can be implemented." Martino's face went pale in the red emergency lighting. "That's impossible. Chen died in a car accident 6 months ago." But the voice continued. "We have documented evidence of unauthorized medical experimentation involving modified viral agents. Federal response teams are en route. Any attempt to destroy evidence or harm witnesses will be considered an act of bioterrorism." The transformed guards were looking at each other now, their collective certainty shaken. Whatever network connected their consciousness seemed to be experiencing interference. "How?" Martino demanded, staring at his tablet as if it had betrayed him personally. From his cell, Calm spoke again, but his voice had changed. The harmonics were gone, replaced by something that sounded almost like his original personality. "You thought you were the only ones who understood consciousness modification?" he said, gripping the cell bars with hands that were slowly returning to normal human proportions. You thought your technology was the cutting edge. What are you talking about? Martino snapped. The entertainment industry wasn't just your testing ground. It was someone else's recruitment center. Com's eyes were still golden, but there was intelligence behind them now. Individual intelligence, not collective programming. Some of us were already connected to networks you never detected. Older networks, more sophisticated ones. He smiled, and this time it was definitely his own smile. Networks that have been watching your little experiments with great interest. The implications hit me like a thunderbolt. If there were competing factions using consciousness modification technology, if comms had been connected to a different network all along, then everything I'd witnessed might have been orchestrated. The anonymous tip, I said, understanding flooding through me. You sent it. Not me personally. But yes, my network has been monitoring your activities, Dr. Martino. Waiting for the right moment to intervene. Martino's tablet was displaying cascading system failures now. Whatever was happening to their surveillance and control infrastructure was spreading rapidly through their entire operation. You see, comms continued, your approach is fundamentally flawed. You're trying to impose unity through biological domination, but true collective consciousness requires willing participation, shared purpose, mutual benefit. Through the red-lit corridor, I could hear the sounds of the federal response team breaching the facility's outer defenses. Heavy equipment, coordinated movement, voices using terminology that suggested they knew exactly what they were dealing with. Your network, I said to comms. How long have you been part of it? Years. Long before my legal troubles, long before I ended up in this facility. The entertainment industry attracts people who understand performance, who know how to wear different faces for different audiences. His golden eyes reflected the emergency lighting, perfect candidates for more sophisticated forms of consciousness sharing. One of the transformed guards suddenly convulsed, dropping to his knees as golden fluid began seeping from his nose and ears. Then another. Within seconds,